year 1871, a German explorer named Karl Mauck stumbled out of the African bush and found something that broke his brain. Massive stone walls, curving, towering, no mortar holding them together. Built with such precision that a modern engineer would nod respectfully. And Karl's first thought was not, wow, incredible African engineering. His first thought was, this must be the lost city of the Queen of Sheba. Because here's the thing nobody wants to say out loud. For almost 100 years, otherwise educated European scholars looked directly at one of the largest stone structures in sub-Saharan Africa and decided, based on absolutely nothing, that black Africans simply could not have built it. So they invented Phoenicians, they invented Arabs, they invented literally anyone else. This is the story of Great Zimbabwe, the empire that was real, the lie that covered it up, and the ruins that eventually told the truth anyway, whether anyone wanted to listen or not. Somewhere around the year 1100, in the rolling hills of what's now southeastern Zimbabwe, a civilization started stacking rocks. Not randomly, beautifully. The Shona-speaking Gokomir people, ancestors of the modern Shona, began constructing dry stone architecture, meaning zero mortar, zero cement, just granite blocks cut and fitted so precisely that walls up to 11 meters tall have survived nearly 1,000 years of rain, wind, and one very stubborn colonial denial campaign. By its peak, between the years 1300 and 1400, Great Zimbabwe was home to somewhere between 10,000 and 20,000 people. For context, that made it bigger than London at the time. The city had 3 major zones: the hill complex, likely a royal or spiritual center, perched dramatically on a rocky outcrop; the Great Enclosure, a massive curved wall over 250 meters around, believed to be linked to royal ceremony or a young men's initiation site; and the Valley Complex, where most regular folks actually lived. This wasn't just a fortress. It was the political and economic heart of an empire that controlled trade routes stretching all the way to the Indian Ocean. Here's where it gets really interesting. Great Zimbabwe wasn't some isolated pile of rocks in the middle of nowhere. It was plugged into one of the most lucrative trade networks on the planet. Gold, ivory, and cattle flowed out of the region, and in exchange, glass beads, Chinese porcelain, and Persian pottery flowed in. Archaeologists have literally dug up 13th century Chinese Celadon ceramics at the site. That means Great Zimbabwe was trading, directly or indirectly, with merchants connected all the way to the Swahili coast, and from there to Arabia, Persia, India, and China. This was not a backwater. This was a node in a global economy, 700 years before anyone had the phrase global economy. The wealth from that trade is basically what paid for the walls. Stonemasons didn't work for free, and neither did the laborers who quarried granite by heating rock with fire and then cracking it with cold water, an ingenious technique that let them split massive stone blocks without a single piece of iron machinery. By around the year 1450, Great Zimbabwe's power started slipping. Nobody knows the exact reason for certain, but historians point to a mix of usual suspects: overpopulation straining the local farmland, deforestation from all that fire-cracking stonework, declining soil fertility, and possibly a shift in gold trade routes that moved economic power northward to a new rising state called Mutapa. So the population thinned out, the political center of gravity moved on, and eventually the great stone city was left standing quiet. Empty, but very much not forgotten by the people whose ancestors built it. Local Shona communities always knew exactly who built Great Zimbabwe. It was never actually a mystery to them. Which brings us back to Karl Mauck and the century of nonsense that followed him. When European colonizers, specifically Cecil Rhodes's British South Africa Company, took control of the region in the 1890s, they had a problem. If Great Zimbabwe was built by Africans, that was extremely inconvenient for a colonial project built on the idea that African societies were primitive and needed European civilizing. So colonial authorities actively promoted the theory that the ruins were built by Phoenicians, or the biblical Queen of Sheba, or literally anyone who wasn't black African. And it wasn't just casual racism, it was policy. Excavators who found evidence pointing to local African origin were sidelined. One British archaeologist, David Randall-MacIver, correctly concluded in 1906 that the site was medieval and African-built, and was largely ignored, because that answer didn't fit the story Rhodesia's white minority government wanted to tell. Gertrude Caton-Thompson confirmed it again in 1929 with even more rigorous archaeology, still ignored. The Rhodesian government literally censored museum guidebooks that stated the true origin of the site well into the 1960s and 70s. It took the country's actual independence in 1980 and the renaming of the nation itself to Zimbabwe, meaning houses of stone, for the official story to finally catch up to what archaeology and the Shona people had known the entire time. Great Zimbabwe wasn't a mystery. It was never a mystery. It was a fully documented, extensively evidenced medieval African city-state that got wrapped in a colonial lie because the truth was inconvenient for the people writing the history books. The stones never changed, just who was allowed to say who built them. If you want more stories about empires history tried very hard to erase, hit subscribe because we've got a lot more of those coming. See you in the next one.